UFP, the United Federation of Podcasts.
Welcome to Franchise Fatigue, the United Federation of Podcasts, little podcast devoted to films, sequels, and remakes. We watch them and then we talk about them for you guys because we love them. We're a couple of nerdy guys and we love sequels and we love remakes. I'm your host, Brandon-Shea Mutella. Joining me, as always, is my wonderful, beautiful cousin, Zach Moore.
I love you too, cuz.
Oh, man. You want to make some gnocchi with me? Here, let me grab your hand.
Yes.
I'll teach you how to roll it.
Oh, all right. But we're not alone, thank goodness. To cut the sexual tension, we have our good friend Chris Tribuzio who's back with us to complete the trilogy. What's up, Chris?
Hey, compare, ci va a suonare, ci si suona, ufficialetta, ma come si suona, ufficialetto. Hey guys, thanks for inviting me to your dinner table. It's very much appreciated and sad that we have to end this on the 3rd.
Good singing. I love it.
His name wasn't on the list, but we let him in anyway.
Nice.
We let him in anyways. Awesome. He's got a temper.
A little bit.
Anywho, we are here to finish off the Godfather trilogy. You know, I am so glad, Zach, that we decided to do this, because this has been a lot of fun. I'm really happy that we got to watch these again. It has been so long since I've seen these movies, and they are so good. This was a lot of fun, and I don't know. This is why I love doing this podcast already. This is only our 3rd franchise, and we're wrapping it up tonight. But I'm so glad we're doing this because it's letting me revisit old movies that I haven't had a chance to watch because I've been wasting my time watching Discovery 9 times. Well, twice, anyways. But
yeah,
it's
the Godfather movies. They're these legendary films of cinema, but they're ones that might not necessarily watch like all the time because they're a commitment. You got to sit down and watch something for 3+ hours. So to really dedicate the time to check them out. I hadn't watched these in several years, especially not the 3rd one, which we're here to talk about tonight.
Yes, and I predicted that I'd need to have a little bit of drinks, because we've been going back and forth on Twitter already. So I'm actually when I drink like liqueurs, like Baileys and stuff, I just drink it by the glass. So this is my 3rd glass of Baileys right now, like just pure Baileys. So I think I'm going to need it for this conversation. Because spoilers, I love this movie. I think it's great. Tristan Riddell of the Nerd Party Network loves it. Matt Curione of the Talk Film Society. This is actually his favorite of the 3. He loves this movie, and I think that's wonderful because it's the John Champion rule, in effect. Whatever you're watching, somebody's least favorite, but it's also somebody's favorite, and that just proves it. So this is Matt Curione's favorite in the trilogy. And we'll find out if you guys' opinions have changed because you haven't seen it in a long time. So we are going to jump into some trivia by Zach Moore before we talk about the movie.
We are. So The Godfather Part III. This was the only film in the Godfather trilogy not to win the Academy Award for Best Picture, nor to be selected for preservation by the National Film Registry. So, National Film Registry.
Yeah, but it was nominated. It was nominated for Best Picture.
It was nominated. It was also the only Godfather film in the series to not have multiple acting nominations at the Academy Awards and to not win any awards in the acting categories. So, talking about awards and whatnot, to wrap up our award talk, this was the first time a second sequel in a film series has been nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. It's also the only time an actor has been nominated for a role in the 3rd film of a film series, that being Andy Garcia's nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Now, as far as the title goes, Francis Ford Coppola, he really wanted the film to be called The Death of Michael Corleone, rather than Godfather Part III, but in the end he was overruled by the studio, and I agree. I mean, once you kind of stick to, and we can talk about it as we go by franchise here with titles, but I think once you stick to a format, you need to keep to that format. So you got part one, well, it wasn't called part one, right? But you have The Godfather, you have part two, and then it's only logical for it to be followed by part three. Now, due to the success of the first two films, Paramount tried to do a sequel for years without Coppola, but he refused to make another film. And there were like a dozen scripts written for this, and most of them included the Corleone family being led by Michael's son Anthony, battling the CIA, Fidel Castro's Cuban government, taking that thread from Godfather Part II. In a late 1970s draft, Mario Puzo wrote, dealt with Anthony Corleone being recruited by the CIA to assassinate a Latin American dictator. They actually were set for this film for a 1980 Christmas release date, but Coppola discarded all these ideas and decided to work on a script with Puzo, until Coppola decided to abandon it, and they wrote another script in 1986, which is really closer to what we got in Godfather Part III, and it was going to be a back-and-forth film. It showed the early life of Sonny Corleone, and also his sons Vincent, kind of like Godfather 2 style, but with that branch of the family instead of Michael and Vito like it had in Godfather Part 2. There was talk about Michael Mann directing it, and even Sylvester Stallone possibly directing it or starring in the film. So those are the pre-Godfather 3 things that were going around before we got the film we got.
Those are the mirror universe versions.
Yes. So Coppola, now, he admitted that he was unhappy over the final product because of the lack of time working on the script. He only had 1 year to write, direct, and edit the film. And he wanted $6 million to be the writer, producer, and director with 6 months of work on script writing. But the studio instead only gave him $1 million in fees and 6 weeks to work on the script in order to make a hard deadline of a Christmas 1990 release. His other biggest regret was the character of Tom Hagen had to be dropped because Robert Duvall had some financial demands that were not met by the studio. And then, Hagen had been an essential character in the first two parts, so you feel his missing in this film. Now, he wanted the same price that Pacino was getting. So Duvall, he was offered $1 million to reprise his role, but Pacino was offered $5 million, and he thought that was unfair. And Diane Keaton got $1.5 million. So I mean, people can say that he's greedy, but if he was going to be the co-star with Al Pacino and he was going to get 1/5 of the price, I totally see Robert Duvall's point of view on that. Now, Pacino, right, even though he got $5 million, he demanded $7 million and a percentage of the gross of the film to reprise his role as Michael. Coppola refused, and he threatened to rewrite the script by starting off with Michael's funeral sequence. So Pacino ended up agreeing to the $5 million offer. Now,
he made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
Exactly. Well done. Now, Robert De Niro, who of course played young Vito in Godfather Part 2, he actually lobbied for the role of Vincent. But Coppola actually considered this, but then it would have necessitated aging the characters more and setting it more closer to the present day instead of, obviously the film's set in the late 70s, but it was produced in 1990. But eventually, Coppola decided to leave that alone. They thought, maybe the family resemblance, they can play it off that way, but they ended up casting a new actor as Vincent. Now, a long list of well-known names were considered to play Vincent Mancini, including Alec Baldwin, Nicolas Cage, Tom Cruise, Matt Dillon, Val Kilmer, Charlie Sheen, and Billy Zane. So, ultimately, of course, it went to Andy Garcia, and we'll talk about his performance as we go. Nominated for Academy Award, so they did something right there. Bridget Fonda, who was in the film as Grace Hamilton, the reporter at the beginning of the film, she auditioned for the role of Mary, but instead cast as Grace. And I thought to myself watching it, man, they should have cast her as Mary. I didn't know at the time that she auditioned for it, but we'll get into that. That'll be a long line of conversation here, I'm sure. Now, Diane Lane and Virginia Madsen also auditioned for Grace Hamilton, or were considered at least. And Julia Roberts turned down the role of Mary in order to star in Pretty Woman. Now, Winona Ryder, she was cast as Mary. She actually arrived on set to perform, but ultimately backed out. She was exhausted. She got diagnosed with exhaustion. She had to drop out of the film because of that. And there was lots of conversation about why she actually had to drop out. But she actually threatened lawsuits. Was threatened with lawsuits from Paramount Pictures for dropping out of the film. But many of the cast, like Diane Keaton and Al Pacino, were very supportive and checked in on her during her recovery. And, to replace her, we got Sofia Coppola, who is the daughter of Francis Ford Coppola. Now, she had played a couple roles in a couple of the previous films. She had played Michael's daughter as an infant in The Godfather, and an unnamed child on a ship in The Godfather Part II. So she had actually been around. Famously, Coppola and his casting his family members, right? This is Exhibit A of that right here. Now, she had to redub about 20% of her original dialogue from the final cut, and I think that, just commentary from me here, I think that adds to a big disconnect between her character and her acting from what else is going on there. There were criticisms that she had a quote-unquote Valley Girl accent. That's another reason they did some ADR with her. Michael's son Anthony, cast first and foremost for his singing voice, so went to Frank D'Ambrosio because they searched over 200 actors who could have a great tenor voice. And so, his being a musician being a major part of this film, that was the deciding factor. The opening shots of the film, of the Corleone compound from Godfather Part II, that's actually shot for Godfather Part II and were deleted in the final film. And they had been used as the opening credits for the Godfather saga that showing on broadcast TV of Parts 1 and 2, and then they reused them here, repursed them here for Godfather 3, because, again, my side comment, I was like, oh, wow, they went and recreated all this stuff from the previous film. No, they just had it sitting around the cutting room floor. Now, the movie was originally intended to open with the scene of Michael discussing business at the Vatican, but instead they went with that stock footage and the voiceover, and they moved that scene to much later in the movie after all his ceremony and party and whatnot. Now, in the scene where the thugs break into Vincent's house and he shoots and kills them, you can see a picture of Sonny in the background there. Because I don't know if you guys caught it. I caught it. I was like, oh, there's James Caan back there.
Oh, yeah, I didn't.
I caught it.
And I believe there's
Nice.
There's a couple more later on in the movie as well. They have a couple pictures of Sonny, and then I think Robert De Niro's Vito, and and all these family pictures they have all around. Now, according to Coppola, the original script had a very different ending in which Michael and Kay reconcile together after the death of their daughter. But during this ceremony, gunman breaks in, guns down Michael before he is shot, and he dies in Kay's arms. But Coppola decided against that and opted for the ending that we got in the actual film, which was apparently inspired by a real-life murder by a stray shot from sound designer Richard Begg's daughter. So Richard Begg's a sound designer. His daughter had been killed by a stray bullet shot on a hit, so they kind of incorporated that into the film here. Now, we see old Michael Corleone at the end of the film, and although the year is never mentioned in the quote-unquote family tree on the DVD release, makes that, or places that scene in 1997. So that's kind of that's the future for when this film came out in 1990. So there you go. And Michael Corleone's funeral was actually written and rehearsed, but not shot. They decided just to end the film on the note with him slumping down on the chair. And then finally, in March 2010, Andy Garcia revealed in an interview that Coppola did have plans for a Godfather Part IV. And much to call back to the original kind of ideas for Godfather Part III, much like Godfather Part II, this film will follow a dual narrative in two different eras. One story focusing on Vincent and leading the family into the modern era, much like Michael did in Part II, and the other focusing on Sonny and the rise of him, played by Leonardo DiCaprio. He was Coppola's first choice for the role of young Sonny. So Coppola was working on this with Puzo, but Mario Puzo passed away. That kind of cut short the development. Coppola didn't feel comfortable carrying on with the franchise without Puzo, so the project was abandoned. Although Paramount Pictures has considered proceeding many, many times. But as of today, there are no plans for a fourth film, but who knows what the future may hold. So there you go. There's your trivia for The Godfather Part III.
Excellent. Very well done, Zach. Thank you very much for your thorough, in-depth discussion and history of the third film. There's lots of great stuff there. But where I want to start with our discussion today, Chris, I'll go to you. I want to talk about the title of the film. So, we've talked before about how The Godfather and The Godfather Part II are like one story. And this movie is kind of tacked on. would your impressions of the film be different had this been called The Death of Michael Corleone?